ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Freedom Party's Agenda 8990 dinner. For those of you who don't know me, my name is William Frampton. I have the distinct honor and privilege to be Freedom Party's Metro Region Vice President and Metro Chairman, and your host this evening. There are times I know that we are inclined to forget the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. It's easy to overlook the fact that we do live in one of the freest countries in the world. People here aren't arbitrarily removed in the middle of the night, never to be seen again. And that is something we should remember and cherish very dearly. And so I would ask you at this time to rise and join me in a toast to the freedoms we enjoy. To the freedoms we enjoy. The liberties we cherish are under philosophical attack in today's world. It is very rare that those of us who are concerned about this situation can take concrete action to reverse this trend. Our guest speaker this evening is uniquely qualified to address this subject. He is a tireless and hard-working campaigner for individual liberty, who brings a principled and consistent approach to his political activities. He understands the fact that ideas rule the world, and he knows the ideas that are required to sustain our freedoms. Those of us here tonight have a unique opportunity to strike a blow against the forces of statism, and there literally is no time like the present. So would you please join me in extending a warm welcome to Freedom Party leader Robert Metz.
Introduction. I don't know about the tireless part though, because boy, I've been tired in this business. I wrote a nice speech for everyone. It's about 8.5 hours long. And I've got it laid all out here on the table in front of me. And so I've got so much I want to cover tonight. And I've been told by some people, keep it real short. Keep it down to 20 minutes, ask them for money and get out. Well, it might take a few minutes longer than that. But what I've got planned tonight is basically an overview of a number of things that affect the challenge before us. I want to talk about philosophy, I want to talk about issues on a one-on-one basis, and I want to talk about Freedom Party, and I want to talk about what each of us can do as individuals to fight for freedom and what each of us can do as a group to fight for freedom. These are just the basics of the options we have in front of us. This is a call to action. I've called you all here tonight because I want you. I want your bodies, I want your minds, I want your hearts, I want your souls to work for freedom. And your cash. I'm going to try to cover as many issues as I possibly can. I want to cover some of the advice that we've been following from other people that we've read, people who've been involved in politics, who've been involved in the fight for freedom, how we've applied it. I know that I'm not going to be able to cover every detail that I can possibly get at, so for that reason we're going to have a question period at the end of my own presentation, and so that no one will leave this room tonight at least without the answer to some question that might be foremost on your mind. So that if I skip something, please ask, and we're going to have room for that at the end of the evening. We've also got a couple video clips to show you a little bit about Freedom Party and what we're all about, how we do things in the media, and how the media portrays us. So while I'm looking at all my notes here, where to start? Perhaps with a little bit of humor here. You know, there are 8 officially registered political parties here in the province of Ontario. Freedom Party is a provincially registered party. People still ask all the time, are you federally registered? No, we're not. We're a provincially registered party. There are 7 other parties officially registered in the province. You know the big 3. There's also the Family Coalition Party, there's the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, and the Communist Party. Now I thought, in a way of juxtaposing how we view ourselves as opposed to these parties, I thought maybe I'd start with a little bit of light humor. Light bulb humor, if you allow me. You've heard those jokes, you know, how many so-and-sos does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, let me ask you, how many liberals do you suppose it takes to screw in a light bulb? Pick a number. Any number. You'll be right every time. How many conservatives does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, after 3 studies, 4 royal commissions, and after proper contracts and subsidies have been awarded, 1.5. The middleman got in there somewhere. I can't understand. How many New Democrats does it take to screw in a light bulb? No, not quite. Actually, just 1. But they get it with lifetime job security, because NDP bulbs don't have any threads. All right, how many Family Coalition Party members does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, you're right, Mark. You never get them to answer the question. I guess you know that they don't believe in screwing around. How many Libertarian Party members does it take to screw in a light bulb? None. That's why they're still in the dark. They think the market will take care of it. How many communists does it take to screw in a light bulb? They don't screw in light bulbs, they force them in. How many Green Party members does it take to screw in a light bulb? None. They prefer the dark. You're right, Mark. All right, here's a big question. How many Freedom Party members does it take to screw in a light bulb? 1. Well, everyone knows. It's a matter of choice. You know, although some of these jokes might have been groaners, they do, in a way, reflect how we juxtapose ourselves against other political parties. You know, the conservatives have always been identified, people always relate conservatives with business and politics. The 2 things are, you know, always together with that party. But business and politics don't mix. Either you're in politics or you're in business. You can't be in both. As soon as you are, you've got a conflict of interest. I can't be a member of 2 clubs at once, especially if one's opposing another, and expect to be getting anywhere. It doesn't work that way. Same way with the New Democrats. The New Democratic Party is really the Labour Party. They believe in mixing labor with politics. You know, either you're working for your employer or you're working against them. And unfortunately, if you're getting into politics, you're likely to be working against your employer if you're taking that politics to the workplace. The Liberals, on the other hand, you know, they are the current party of public opinion. They'll do whatever the public wants, whatever quote the public says. I've campaigned against Solicitor General Joan Smith, and she's constantly told me that she's there to do what the public wants. And I keep asking her, I said, Joan, why do we need you then? If we just want to do what the public wants, why don't we just have a big computer and everybody vote and everybody send in their vote? Then we won't need you. And you can call up all your friends anytime about any issue. Anyways, why are we all here tonight? I told you why I'm here. I want your support. I hope you're here for a similar reason. I hope you're looking for a new political choice. We have about, this evening, we have about 1/3 of the people here who are fairly new to Freedom Party, who perhaps have never been to one of our events before, who really don't understand all the issues that we're about. And the other 2/3 of you generally have been to some of our events, are perhaps just marginally aware of what we've been doing. I'm not going to be spending this evening going over our whole record of action. I've tried to cover that by bringing a host of literature here, which I just want to draw your attention to for a second. We've got newsletters, we've got issue papers. We have documented our record of action here. You'll see a little bit of it here on the video display tonight, but that's not what I want to concentrate on for tonight. I also don't want to leave you with the assumption that I'm here to answer everything or to offer a perfect solution to our society and our social and political woes. Just doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a perfect society because people live in it. And people aren't perfect. So what you have to design is a society that's not perfect, but that you strive for a certain ideal. A society in which may not give us everything that we want, but it creates the framework so that we can all, to the best of our abilities, obtain those things we want. You may not be happy with what I've got to say tonight. Some of the issues that I might touch upon, you may not agree with. And I can accept that. You don't have to agree with every single issue, with every single premise, to be a supporter of Freedom Party. I have to really, there's a point I'm trying to make here, because so many people who tell me they won't support this party refuse to support us for a single reason. And I think this is a tragedy. A lot of people won't support us, say, for our stand on abortion, or for our stand on Sunday shopping. And I lose a lot of good people because of that. And yet, those same people will tell me, but I agree with you on every other issue. I agree with you on this, I agree with you on that. But they make their decision not on the things they agree with, they make their decision on the things they disagree with. Can you imagine what life would be like if we ran our personal relationships this way? You know, you're going to leave your wife, I'll leave my wife because of one thing I don't like about her, or one thing that bothers me, like everything else. Where would our lives be? We'd never get anything done. And this is one of the strongest things that I've been trying to do at Freedom Party, is I've been trying to work with people to the best of my ability who may not agree with everything that I have to say or with my total perspective, but that's what I'm here to do. I want to bring different individuals in. We're here to defend individual rights. This is what we're here to do. If anything, Freedom Party is a political party that's not really political. That may sound like a paradox or almost a contradiction, but it's not, because you see, politics is, from our point of view, it introduces something into our society, what I call force, and I'm going to get into defining these terms in a few minutes, into relationships where otherwise you don't have to have this element in your relationships. The things we do through politics just are amazing, because we would never accept the premise of the political things we do in our business lives, in our personal lives, or in many other areas of our private lives. So why do we accept them when it comes to politics? Really funny, I was talking to, there's an elderly gentleman always calls our office. His name's Howard Mulholland. And I know a number of you know him because he calls in about sometimes twice a week in our office. And he's always complaining about government, especially the municipal government. He really hates what's going on municipally. And he's talking to me the other day while I'm trying to sell him a ticket to come to this dinner, and he says to me, I'm losing faith in politics as a solution to anything. And I said, Howard, you're right, politics is not a solution to anything. Of course, he didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to hear that I agreed with him on this fundamental premise. He wanted an answer to be delivered to him on a platter, and I'm afraid there are no such answers, and this is another thing that might disappoint some of you tonight. I started this party with a group of other people, fully aware and conscious of the fact that our electability could be at least a decade or two away. And I mean electability, not elected, electability. And there are a number of reasons for this. For starters, let's face it, the public as a whole does not understand individual freedom. As a consequence, does not agree with us in terms of a lot of our stands on issues. They might agree with one issue or agree with another issue, but they can't take the whole package. And that's one of the problems with politics, too, is that politics is a package deal. A lot of philosophers have recognized this fact. In fact, one of the philosophers I'll be getting into shortly related the problem of trying to get any effective action done through anything that's a package deal. I mean, if you support the conservatives, you might support them, say, on one or two issues. If you vote for the Conservatives, you're also getting all the other things that you don't support, things that you may very much disagree with. And that's unfortunately how people vote in the marketplace today. They vote generally not for things, though. They vote against things because it's easier to know that one thing you're against. Just for the same reason that people don't support Freedom Party for the one issue, that's why they don't support other parties too. And as long as this principle of voting is in place, this principle that you vote against things and not for them, things are just simply never going to change. We have a tremendous challenge ahead of us. It's not just a matter of getting organized and fielding candidates and doing all that stuff that you see traditional political parties doing. We have a unique challenge ahead of us, and we're going to take it on, and that's to educate the public that we want to have voting for us. Let's face it, if they vote for us now, we will have undermined our purpose, because the public out there doesn't want what we represent yet. They don't understand it. And if, in order to appeal to them, I would have to be either deceitful, misrepresentative, I would have to put my points across or hide what I really think about a particular issue in order to get the vote. And then when I get in, then they're going to be disappointed with me. You know, it was like I had a fellow come up to the office after the 1987 election. He said, you guys are never going to get elected. You guys just aren't doing things the right way. He said, what you should do is you should lie. You should go out there and lie to people. Tell them you're against Sunday shopping. Tell them you're this. And I says to him, well, what am I going to do if I got elected and then I get in there and instead of being against Sunday shopping, I'm for Sunday shopping? He said, that's okay. You just say you change your mind. That was his answer. That's how he saw politics. And the cynicism that you get out of a person like that when they can actually confront you like this and suggest that this is the best way to get elected, you can see how cynical people are generally about politics. And definitely this gentleman Howard I was talking about, he's very cynical about politics as well. So before I begin, I want to just clear up a few things. I'm going to talk about, first of all, the issues, where we stand on the issues. But before I can do that, I've got to clear up a couple of things. First, a little bit of vocabulary, concepts, language we use when we're talking about politics and political issues. I didn't realize it when we scheduled this dinner tonight at the time, a month and a half ago, it just didn't click, that we were coming to Toronto on the same evening that the Dome Stadium was being opened. Interestingly enough, last week in our home paper in London, the London Free Press, beautiful section here on the Sky Dome. You want to read all about the Sky Dome. A real fan back there. Tells you everything that you want to know about the Sky Dome. Well, one of the first questions in here, this is the one that really threw me for a loop, and you wonder why people have a hard time understanding politics. Listen to this first question. Who owns the stadium? Answer. Technically, all Ontario taxpayers own a piece of the dome. Toronto taxpayers, you know, they contribute an extra $30 million over the Ontario taxpayers, so they own a piece of the dome too. But as you read this thing along, you see that really, who owns the dome is a consortium of 28 companies. And they've all received special privileges at the dome. A lot of them have received exclusive supplier rights, including McDonald's, who, quote, invested $5 million in the dome. Oh yeah, sure. They really purchased exclusive supplier rights to the dome. That's what they got. They got a real good deal. But what did the taxpayer get? Do we really own the dome? Think about what the word ownership means. Ownership means having the right to buy, to use, to sell, or dispose of the property that you own. Now, can any of us in this room exercise that right when it comes to the dome? Can I sell my shares? Because I've got them up for sale right now. First buyer? You see, this is the kind of misconceptions that the public operates on, even on a simple word like ownership. Something you would think that people in a free society would take for granted. Problem is, we do take it for granted. We don't think. We feel. We use our heart more than we use our mind. You know, the whole issue of property rights and ownership, we keep talking about public and private property. Well, private property exists, but public property does not. There is no such thing. There's either private property or there's government property. The streets out there belong to the Corporation of the City of Toronto. In my town, the streets belong to the Corporation of the City of London. I can't camp out on those streets. They're not mine. They don't belong to me. There comes another sign off the wall. The movement is collapsing around us. You see what we're up against? But this is one of the things that we, as a political party, just on one word I'm talking about here so far, the challenge before us, to get people to understand what ownership means. That either the government owns something or we own something privately. Now, public property, there's nothing wrong with using that word. There's a lot of things that the public has access to, but that could be either private or government. You can walk into a grocery store, it's privately owned, but it's open to the public. And you know, we start getting so confused with these terms, and you know, you might think this isn't important, but when you start confusing terms like this, and you start basing decisions on things like this, dire consequences occur, and that's what we're seeing in our society today. Another word to deal with. The word selfishness. You know, that's one of the most often used words, or some derivative of selfishness, that politicians and lobbyists use to try and get money from us, the taxpayer, the voter. I want to ask you a question. Who's being more selfish? The person who works hard to earn his money and wants to be able to keep it and spend it as he best sees fit? Or the person who wants to vote for the other guy's money, who didn't work for it, but thinks he has a right to spend it? You know what's funny? In our society today, the guy we're calling selfish is the first guy. The guy who earned the money and who created the wealth in the first place. Politicians, watch that word. You know, like that's a tactic. It's a way to get you to not stand up for your rights because they can make you feel guilty when they use the word selfish. I mean, there is a rational selfishness. Let's face it. Some people do things for themselves that may not be in their best self-interest. That does exist. But when we constantly attach this to a business enterprise or something that a person wants to put himself into, and as long as he's doing that honorably, we're doing ourselves a great disservice if we accept that definition of the word. You know, a lot of people, when they use the word selfishness against you as a producer or as a creator of something, they think that they can avoid being the object of the moral judgment, but you know, that goes along with calling someone selfish or not selfish. If they can call you selfish, then they've got a moral judgment against you. They can make you feel guilty, and you start coughing up those dollars, you know? How do taxes ever get so high? Because we have kept being told, well, we're being selfish. We've got to help this group. We've got to help this group. And now we're in a situation where we're helping so many groups that there's nothing left to help anybody with anymore. And there's more groups than ever before who are looking for help. I'm going to expand on this issue in a few moments when I get down to some specific issues. Another word you see used a lot in politics, sometimes appropriately, sometimes inappropriately, and that's the word force. Force is a handy word. You hear it a lot. I know Paul Magder and Marc Emery probably hear this word about how they're being forced. They're forcing their employees to work on Sundays because they want to have their store open on Sunday. Politicians use that word. You know, they're trying to tell us on the one hand, and they are. They're saying, listen, you can't force these people to work on Sunday. They're telling us that force is wrong, aren't they? Isn't that the message we're supposed to be getting? Okay, force is wrong. Well, if that's right, how can they force a guy to close a store? Isn't that the same thing? How did they suddenly invert that? And how did we just let it slip by? How is it that somebody's obligation to work for his employer is being translated as force, whereas some bureaucrat who has nothing to do with a customer or a store owner or an employer comes in and says, you can't do this or you can't do that, he gets away with it. He's doing it for the public good. He's doing it for everyone. He's trying to protect people from force. Don't believe it. In other words, we use in politics, left wing, right wing. You know, these words always used to bug me because for the longest time I couldn't understand what was wrong with them, and that was that we tend to define left wing and right wing on the wrong side of the spectrum. For the longest time, and I used to do this, so you know, it's something you have to train yourself. People always used to tell me, Well, left-wing people, they don't believe in economic freedom, but they believe in a lot of personal freedom. They're against censorship. They believe in a woman's right to choose on abortion. They believe in a lot of social issues, quote, freedom. The right-wingers, of course, they believe in economic freedom. And you get that constant split there. Well, that's not really the critical element that differentiates left-wing from right-wing, because you can't define a political movement in terms of the freedoms it allows. You've got to define it in terms of the freedoms it does not allow. Freedom is our natural state. We're all human beings. We all have a right to be free, to exercise our own bodies, our own properties, our own minds. Now, when somebody comes along and tells you you can't, how do you get that claim? Where does it come from? You see, really right-wing should be more identified, not in terms of the fact that it allows economic freedom, which is a dubious point to make in the first place, but because generally what goes along with right-wing beliefs is things like censorship, restrictions on personal choices. It can involve anything from abortion to Sunday shopping, restrictions on those very personal things. I don't know how to exactly explain it, but away from the economic. Somehow the right wing has identified, they understand the necessity of a certain amount of freedom in economics. And that's unfortunate because, you know, the conservatives today brought in free trade, which, and I applaud any move in the direction of free trade, by the way, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons. They're already telling us that we need free trade because, boy, if we don't have it, we're gonna get clobbered. We're gonna get clobbered on the international market. Well, that's true, but that's not the reason that you defend free trade. You defend free trade because each individual in a free country has a right to trade with any other free individual in that country. And that's the proper basis for it. But you know, people don't want to believe that, particularly in politics, because if they do believe that, that automatically kills a lot of their political ambition. Socialism, communism, fascism, words you hear used a lot. You know, socialism is really a big con game. It's the ultimate in pyramid schemes. There's no way that you can implement socialism or any degree of it or variant of it without leading ultimately at some point to either communism or fascism. A lot of people don't understand that. You know, these are strong words, communism, fascism. You don't say them in a general public form. I wouldn't be using these words, by the way, if I was out speaking to the general public. I'd have to use different words that they could relate to, because fascism and communism have predetermined ideas in their minds. They don't understand how the two relate to property rights. Communism believes that all productive property should be in the hand of the state and under the control of the state. Fascism believes that all property, productive property, should be privately owned but controlled by the state. Now, what's the difference? You see, that's why fascism has generally been seen as being a little more efficient than communism, because at least it leaves some element of ownership in the hands of private owners who still have some pride in themselves that they'll take care of their property because it's got their name on the title deed, because it's their own reputation that's at stake. You know, it's funny that all these things we say about private individuals, you know, people are not as threatening to each of us as a lot of politicians would have us believe. We don't need all these restrictions between us, because I don't think the average person out there has in his mind to steal, you know, lie, cheat, murder, whatever. These are minorities in our groups, and we have to have laws for those kinds of minorities. And of course, there are the big words that we use here at Freedom Party: individual freedom and rights. A lot of people get offended when they see our statement of principle. In our statements of principle, we say, every individual, in the peaceful pursuit of personal fulfillment, has an absolute right to his life, his liberty, and his property. You get a lot of people coming to me, absolute right? I mean, absolute right, you know? I got a letter in the mail, signed anonymously, our own stuff returned, a return envelope saying, I hope you don't mind my exercising my absolute freedom. And I think what he was referring to is that he didn't put his stamp on the envelope and we had to pay for it, didn't put his name in it. And you can see that this person does not understand what we said. I didn't say absolute freedom, I said absolute right. It's a difference. Individual rights limit our freedom of action in a social setting. The whole point is, I can't be free unless you're free. People think that freedom somehow and rights are a very individualistic concept. They aren't. They're a social concept. They're a concept that we need to live by so that individuals can live together in a society. Rights define and refer only to our freedom of action. So if you've got a property right to something, that means you own it. You're the person that gets to choose who can stay in your house, who can drive your car if you own it, who can use your jacket, your coat. That is your property. You cannot base a right on a political myth, and this is very important. A lot of political parties use the word rights all the time. We've got a lot of artificial rights out there. We've got, right to a job. You ever think about that? The right to a job, what that means? If you just define the words, you suddenly see that it doesn't make sense. What's a job? A job is a relationship between an employee and an employer from the employee's point of view. Well, how can you have a right to a relationship? What if the other person in that relationship doesn't want to be part of that relationship? Doesn't he have any rights? Because if you've got a right to the relationship, what does he have left? Nothing. No rights. So you see, there's no such thing as a right to a job. There's the right to work. And isn't it interesting that politicians are using the right to a job to eliminate the right to work? We've got all kinds of legislation in this country to prevent people from working. You can't compete with any government monopoly. You can't hire people in certain industries on a Sunday or have people working on a Sunday. There are all kinds of minimum wage laws. There are laws that restrict the number of hours people can work. And it's not that these things are bad. Anything that people want as a benefit, there's nothing wrong with benefits. There's nothing wrong with wanting a shorter work week. There's nothing wrong with a lot of the things people want, but unfortunately go through the political process trying to get. You just can't get them through the political process. It doesn't work. True rights have to be based on concrete reality. That word, inalienable right, that means that your rights are yours regardless of the state under which, whether that state acknowledges the right is another matter, of course, but your rights are yours, and that's where that term comes from. Now, when we talk about freedom, of course, refers to an absence of constraint. There are about 50 definitions of the word freedom if you pick up a good enough dictionary. But we use the one definition that was put forth by philosopher-novelist Ayn Rand, and I'll quote it for you. It's in our 1989 calendar of individual freedom. Freedom in a political context means freedom from government coercion. It does not mean freedom from the landlord, freedom from the employer, freedom from the laws of nature, which do not provide men with automatic prosperity. It means freedom from the coercive power of the state and nothing else. Now, that might not be satisfying to a lot of people because, it's nice to be free from responsibility. It's nice to be free from a lot of the other things that we can work hard to be free from. And that, I think, is one of the biggest reasons people, or the public in general, does not support freedom. Because of that other word that goes along with it, and that's individual responsibility. Going to get at this point now, I want to get into some of the issues and apply some of these things that I've just been talking about. And one of the biggest issues, I guess, that bothers a lot of people is Freedom Party's perspective, or any freedom-oriented perspective, on things like welfare, helping the poor. What is the proper role of government in this regard? Where does Freedom Party stand on this? I think one of the biggest things that we have to dispel about welfare is exactly what it is and what it should be. We talk about poverty, we talk about helping those who cannot help themselves, and I'm afraid to say that a lot of what our politicians rather say about welfare and helping the poor is a lot of lip service so that we can really help ourselves. Think about the problem we've created for ourselves and the way that we have chosen to help the poor politically. Personally, if you're going to help the poor, the way you have to do it is find out who is in need and help that person in every respect and get that person back to self-sufficiency. But is that what we do? Not in the least. We do something completely different. We figure that by helping the poor, we can help ourselves, because after all, that's what's going to sell politically. I don't really think the average voter wants to give his money away to somebody else, but he'll do it if he thinks he can get something back from it. So what do? We put in universal programs. We put in universal health care, universal pensions, universal everything. And we do this all under the guise of saying that we're helping the poor. Oh, sure we are. We're helping them to stay poor. And we're going to make ourselves poor in the process, and before we know it, no one's going to be left to help the poor. This principle of universality, like take a look at Via Rail right now. You know, I mean, we're pouring millions and millions and millions into a railway system under the supposed reason that a lot of people can't afford to travel. We need public transportation. Well, it doesn't work that way. If somebody cannot afford a train ticket, for heaven's sakes, help the guy out. Don't subsidize Via Rail. That's not the answer. If you can't afford your medical bills, or you can't afford medical insurance, then you as an individual should be helped out. You don't put in a medical insurance plan that lets everybody have, quote, free service 100% of the time. Every time one of us, one of those people who is able to pay for a visit to the doctor, goes to the doctor and charges it to OHIP, say it costs $50. Well, that's $50 less left in that insurance system for the people who really need it. Why shouldn't that money be left in a system? Why don't we have a real insurance plan? You know, before OHIP was introduced to Ontarians in 1967, do you know that 82% of the people in Ontario had private health insurance that met their needs? I mean, that only leaves 18% left. Now, you can knock off a few of them, because I'm sure there were a lot of rich people who didn't bother with insurance. They could probably afford their own bills. And then you have that other small minority there of people who perhaps were in need, people who were in a situation beyond their control. But the thing we have to do is we've got to separate that group of people, people who are in need, people who need help, from establishing what we have to do, or from as the primary thing to create the ideal society. Our primary thing as a society should not be to help the poor. If we can't create wealth in our society, there won't be anything to help the poor. So the thing that our social system should be geared to is to create opportunity for individuals to help themselves, to be self-sufficient, and then worry about helping the poor as a separate issue and not as a political issue. Now, I'm not about to suggest that I want to pull the plug on people who are in, you know, very serious situations, people who are desperately ill, people who are in a situation now. We cannot do that. Governments have made obligations to us, to citizens, to themselves. Some people are going to be relying on those pensions. And those pensions we've got, it's not a pension plan, it's a pension tax we've got, pension tax system. We've got an unemployment insurance tax system. We don't have an unemployment insurance plan. There's no plan there. There's no money sitting there waiting for us when it's time to collect. All of these plans depend on the fact that there's still more taxpayers out there to milk dry to keep them going. And you know what I found was amazing? When these plans first came into existence, the politicians that were pushing them knew this explicitly. The people that drafted Canada Pension said, oh, we know down the road that there isn't going to be enough money in the system, but we're counting on taxpayers to fund that system. Little did they know that our population would be declining. That people who are affluent tend to be more responsible. That people who are affluent and have more in life tend to be able to do more with their lives. And that the baby boom just will not continue. And that is what people have been expecting the system to work on. So once we've separated in our minds this whole thing of welfare and how to help the poor, I think we can deal with the other issues a little bit more effectively. I just want to go over a few very briefly. And I've got them here somewhere. Okay, I've already discussed just basically the principle I'd like to operate under social services. Education, there's another thing that takes a big bite of our tax dollars. We advocate, as an education system, we think everyone should be responsible for their own education ultimately. Because you're either going to be responsible for your own or you're going to be responsible for everybody. And then if everybody's responsible for everybody, that ends up nobody being responsible. We believe the taxpayer should be allowed to direct their tax dollars to the educational institution of their choice. Ultimately, I would like to see the government out of entirely, but this is a step we have to take to get the government out of the business first, and then to get the government out of funding. A lot of people think that education will suffer as a result of that. I think if you look at the alternative, education is suffering now. That the system's out of money, that the system has got no place to go, and that they're looking for desperate answers to a solution they just don't want to address. Because the final solution is that we've got to pay our own way. I'll be happy to answer any questions to expand on these things a little later on. Censorship, we do not believe in censorship. I'm going to go through these issues real quick now. We believe in freedom of choice in ideas. We believe in freedom of choice in thought. And freedom of speech is a fundamental human right. So let's protect it and say no to censorship. Rent controls. We don't believe in rent controls. Rent controls have contributed housing and accommodation shortages in every place they've been tried. You know, New York City's had rent control since World War II. You know how expensive it is trying to get into New York City to get an apartment? I mean, the same situation's happening today in Toronto and other areas that practice the rent control. Big issue that's on everybody's mind, taxation. You know, the early principles of democracy said we're going to have taxation with representation. We don't have that anymore. We've got taxation. We've got representation. But the two have nothing left to do with each other anymore. We've got some people voting taxes out of other people to give them benefits. Is that right? How do you expect a system to work like that? You know, in the old days when democracy was first being tried, the idea was that if you went to vote for higher taxes, that was your money you were voting to spend, not somebody else's money. And that is why early on the vote was very much tied to whether or not you own property in a particular community. I mean, if you own property in a city and that city is going to be providing you with services, then those taxes should be based on that service. It should be a service, it shouldn't even be called a tax really. It should be called a payment for service received. But the funny thing about taxes, and I know people complain about it, you know, I was told by an associate of mine in London, Alan Weeble, who happens to be former chairman of the Board of Education there and was a school board trustee until last year and ran successfully in local elections repeatedly. He told me one day, you know, Bob, he said, you guys aren't ever going to win on taxes. People like to pay taxes. And I said, Alan, you're crazy. That's not how you're crazy. I mean, people are complaining about it all the time. He says, oh, sure, they complain about it. But that'll never be the issue. If the issue is spending more money on schools, he said, well, taxpayers will vote for it every time because they still think that they can get more out of the system than they have to put into it. So you can see what we've got ahead of us in terms of education and educating the public. I've got a lot of other issues here. Sunday shopping, as you know, we believe I don't really care if you like Sunday shopping or not. I personally hate it. I hate shopping any day of the week. But you cannot have laws that prohibit people from opening their stores on a Sunday. This is a fundamental violation of a shop owner's right to his own property. If today the law can tell Paul Magder or Marc Emery that they can't open their store on a Sunday or use a certain section of their store on a Sunday, then tomorrow you can bet that law is going to be able to tell you what room you can use in your house on a Sunday, whether you can turn your TV on or not, whether you can drive your car. And you're going to say, well, how did the law ever get this power? This is not right. And yet the very people that would complain about that were the people that voted for Sunday shopping laws. Never thinking beyond the immediate moment. They just think for those immediate benefits and don't think of the final consequence. We're running pretty quick on time here. I just want to talk about some of the advice we've been given. We can get over the issues. If there's any issues I've missed, we've got a lot of stuff there on issues, and you can ask questions after. What I want to do now is what can we do about it? What can we as individuals, what can we as a group do about it? And I've used the advice. When Freedom Party was started, we took very seriously the advice of some of the leading philosophers and advocates of individual freedom. Most predominantly among them, of course, as many of you know, was philosopher-novelist Ayn Rand. If you're unfamiliar with Rand, I really suggest you get to know her writings. She has probably done more for philosophy than anyone since Aristotle, and we're talking a couple of thousand years back. You know, Ayn Rand is to philosophy what Albert Einstein is to physics. Both developed very scientific equations about the nature of reality. And it propelled their field into the next century. You know, I could just see Albert Einstein sitting there at the breakfast table, you know, looking at his bowl of Cheerios and looking at all those little circles and going, ah, E equals MC squared. What a profound revelation. Existence exists. Well, Ayn Rand came up with an equation that was very similar. It says the same thing. A is A. He said, if that's a table, then that's a table, and you can't call it something else. If you call it something else, you could be in trouble. If you call that a car, and I go and tell somebody, you know, want to drive the car out of here, and he thinks that's a car, he's going to have trouble. You have to call things what they are. And of course, Rand identified very clearly in politics is that's how politicians get away with 90% of what they get away with. They just don't call things what they are. They're not being honest with us. Rand explained from the roots up how a philosophy should work, why it works, and right to the very fundamentals. When you read Rand, you might be offended if you don't agree with everything she says, because it's going to force you to make a decision. It's going to force you to arrive at a conclusion of your own. But one of the things that Rand said early in 1964, she was quoted, you know, Rand was always a person who did not recommend political action. And I agree with her, because political action in the traditional sense is not the way to go. And as a consequence, a lot of people who read Rand didn't get involved in politics and join a party like this. Got a quote by Rand when she said why you should get involved in politics. You know, Ayn Rand was born in 1905. Her name was Alice Rosenbaum, and she was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, so she knew a lot. She insisted that she had to learn a lot about what it was that made her country collapse to the degree it was. And when she went to America, she went and set out on this search in terms of what it was that caused that and what the elements were that create a society heading away from freedom rather than heading towards it. And she said in an interview in Playboy magazine back in March '64, she said, when I came to the United States from Soviet Russia, I was interested in politics for only one reason, to reach the day when I would not have to be interested in politics. I wanted to secure a society in which I would be free to pursue my own concerns and goals, knowing that the government would not interfere to wreck them, knowing that my life, my work, my future were not at the mercy of the state or at a dictator's whim. Only today I know that such a society is an ideal and not yet achieved, that I cannot expect others to achieve it for me, and that I, like every other responsible citizen, must do everything possible to achieve it. In other words, I'm interested in politics only in order to secure and protect freedom. Isn't that an interesting word, freedom? You know, Rand consciously left the, quote, mechanics of implementing a free society to others. She was really more concerned with laying the basic foundation and getting that supply of intellectual and moral ammunition that you will need when you get out there into the real world, when you actually apply those principles. And a lot of people have tried to apply them and failed, and some people have gotten marginal success. But we're a political party that's working at it. And some of the advice that Ayn Rand put, and this is advice that you can take as individuals or as a group. But she wrote a letter back in '72 called What Can One Do? And she says, you know, that's a bad question. What can one person do? When you ask that, you're really making an excuse for yourself. You're trying to say, well, I'm helpless. Can't do anything, one person. And she says, you're right. If you're just talking about what can one person do, one person can't really do anything. No one can change a country single-handed. So what she asked was, why do people look at the question that way? Example she gives, she says, suppose there's a doctor in the midst of an epidemic. It's in some third world country and there's a big epidemic going on. Would he ask himself, how can I, as one doctor, treat millions of patients and restore this whole country to perfect health? Of course, he would never ask himself that. He'd know that whether he was alone or as part of an organized medical campaign, that all he could really do is reach the people that he can reach. They're right around him. Freedom starts right there, right at home, with the people around you. And nothing else is possible. Don't even look for an answer anywhere else because it doesn't exist. And as long as you keep looking, you're going to keep looking, you're going to keep looking, you're going to keep looking because the answer is not out there. The answer is right here in this room. You know, people approach intellectual issues, says Rand, in a way they would never approach a physical issue. They'd never try to stop an epidemic overnight, she says, or build a skyscraper single-handed. Nobody'd ever look at it that way. And she says the reason for this is because people tend to regard knowledge, I guess, as irrelevant, ideas as irrelevant. And this is the one thing that they cannot continue to do if we want to see a change. So Rand suggests that if you're seriously interested in fighting for a better world, you have to start by identifying the nature of the problem. The problem that we have in our society today is not a political problem, it's a philosophical problem. Politics is, and I'll be the first to admit it, it's the last bit of implementing a philosophy. You can't convert everyone in an intellectual battle, it won't happen. But it's true, and I've learned this from personal experience, that everything in politics works with minorities. There's no such thing as a big majority out there. Every group, every political party only consists of a minority of people who've decided to do something. So as she says, an intellectual movement doesn't really start with organized action. It starts with an educational campaign. And that's one of the things that we're into very heavily. It's not that we're not organizing. We are going to continue to organize. But we're not going to organize in a vacuum. We're going to organize in a very concrete way, educating the people we want to have vote for us. I'm not just going to go out and ask for a vote. Vote for me, I'll promise you this. Because I can't promise them that. Because it's not mine to promise. It belongs to somebody else. If you teach men the right philosophy, says Rand, everything else will take care of itself. Once they understand those fundamental bases. So she says, you know, you've got to get your own act together first. Organize your own ideas. And all you have to do is just say no to sometimes. You know, somebody says something. Rand says, all you got to do is speak. Say no. You disagree with something, say no. You don't have to give an answer. It doesn't have to be at every time. Speak at any scale. Large or small groups, one-on-one. Any legitimate public forum. That's how you spread ideas. Write a letter to the editor. I cannot underestimate, or overstate, rather, the value of a letter to the editor. You know, I'm in a unique position. I'm in a political party, so that I get feedback from people. I get feedback when I've got a letter to the editor, and it's phenomenal. And a lot of people sitting in their private homes who write letters to the editor and get them published, and they think, boy, that was a great letter I wrote. I wonder if someone's going to recognize me or see me, and they never get a response, and then they think it was a waste of time. It wasn't. There are probably thousands of people out there who are reading that letter. Some of them probably clipped it out. Some of them probably used those ideas to further their own ideas. I had a guy come into my office one day, said, oh yeah, I remember reading your letter. It was just in the paper the other day. That letter about the NDP winning that election out in BC. I'm going, the other day? Yeah, I was talking about a letter I wrote 3 years earlier. And in his mind, he expressed that as the other day. So you see, it's a very slow process. Ideas permeate into a society very slowly. One of the things Rand really, I think she might have stopped some people from getting involved with a group like Freedom Party was when she suggested that people should not join the wrong ideological movement or group in order, quote, just to do something. But she really meant by ideological, she meant groups or movements that proclaim some kind of very vague, generalized, undefined, and as she says, usually contradictory political goals. She says if you join a group like that, you're going to end up defeating your own purposes, your own objectives. What she recommended was joining ad hoc groups, ad hoc committees, groups that are organized to achieve a very single specific goal. And I should let you know, we've done this several times. Freedom Party has organized on an ad hoc basis. We've done campaigns against unions. We've done campaigns against taxes in London for hosting the Pan Am Games. We did this all not as Freedom Party, but we created little groups. Because what you can do that way, you can get a lot of people who might disagree on 100 issues, but agree on the one issue. You can get them all together in one room. Then you tell them the principles on which this issue works, and then they go, hey, wait, that might work in that issue. To give you an idea of how some of our activities, because I want to wrap wrap things up a little quicker. I'm going to show you a couple of clips right now that we've got that we have on video here for you. One's about 1.5 minutes long, another one's about 3 minutes long, and one's 5 minutes long, 5 or 6 minutes long. The first two are from the election 1987. And there were some comments that I just wanted to... in the first one, the first one's a global news production, or global news actually, and they wedged us, I know some of you might have seen these first two clips, and they wedged us between the Communist Party and the Green Party. I kind of left it in there to give you an idea of how we contrasted to those other parties. The fellow that interviewed us in this particular interview for TV was George Wolfe of Global News. And I could tell when he walked into the office he was really, really cynical about fringe parties and what smaller political parties can do. But after he talked to us, and you'll see at the end of the clip, he gives a summation of what effect a small political party can have. And notice that he says George Wolfe from London, Ontario, because that's where he saw us, and that's where we kind of turned him right around. He didn't see a bunch of people that were acting like a little bit off the deep end, shall we say, or not defined in their issues, or unrealistic expectations. The second clip is from CFTO Toronto. Again, local election coverage. Really funny, you'll notice when you see how it starts. Bill, you're in this clip. And the clip starts off saying, Bill Frampton has no intention of getting elected. That's not what we told him. We told him we had no expectations of getting elected. A slightly different thing. They cleared it up by the end of the clip. But it really sounds funny when you hear it just coming on right at the beginning. Can you imagine what kind of thought that leaves in a lot of people's minds? And of course, the last one is a local piece that was done, a special on us, on Channel 10 News in London, Ontario, where Freedom Party is headquartered. And it was done just this past winter, in November or December, I think it was aired, talking about what Freedom Party is doing in between elections. And I think you get some idea of what we've been into and a lot of the issues that we've been into that I haven't even mentioned here. So I'll put those on. They should run for about 10 or 11 minutes, and then I'll have some closing remarks and we'll have some questions, okay? So here we go.
And the so-called fringe parties are severely underfunded, but serious about the election. And in the second part of his report on alternate parties, George Wolfe looks at what keeps them going.
It certainly isn't the dream of quick political glory or power that drives those on the fringe of politics. The Communists haven't elected a member since the 1950s, and their slate of candidates has dwindled to only half of what it was in 1981. Without much money or prospects of more than 0.1% of the vote, they run on commitment.
I certainly believe in spreading the word, the gospel, the communist gospel.
The Communists obviously favor social welfare programs, and they're against free trade, against U.S. branch plants in Canada, against taxes on poor and middle-income earners. The party leader likes to stress his socialist platform.
We think eventually, through this election, we'll improve our positions and will help stimulate the action that's necessary to fight for the rights of working people.
Near the other end of the spectrum is the Freedom Party. Born 3 years ago in London during a business tax revolt, the party wants no part of the political left or right.
The Freedom Party believes that the purpose of government is to protect our individual freedom of choice and not to restrict it.
A pro-freedom platform means they're against censorship laws, against Sunday closing laws, and against most labor legislation, but emphatically for free trade. Obviously not a quick ticket to Queen's Park.
We don't even think of our chances of getting elected as being a viable alternative in this particular election. Our whole campaign is geared to get support from people via our literature and return cards so that we can build an organization that will very soon become electable in this province.
In spite of successes for the Green Party in Germany, Ontario's Greens remain small, poor, and quite deliberately leaderless. The party here is intriguing not because it's an immediate threat to established powers, but because of a unique platform based largely on environmentalism. Greens are against pollution, against nuclear energy, for conservation, and for decentralized government. A good thing because they likely won't be in it.
The election's a good opportunity for us to talk the issues, whereas other parties may worry about image and handshaking and baby kissing and so on. We want to talk seriously about the issues.
In spite of their size, fringe political parties do not deserve our scorn. In fact, great Canadian parties have collapsed, and other parties have risen from obscurity to take their place. And even if power eludes them forever, they can be a source of ideas that can one day shape the Canadian mainstream. George Wolfe, Global News, London.
Bill Frampton has no intention of getting elected, but he's campaigning anyway for the Freedom Party in Mississauga East. The man who started the party in 1984 says its philosophy is simple.
We think that governments should be there preventing some people from imposing their will on others rather than the reverse. I mean, it's fine if I don't want to go shopping on Sunday, but I don't have the right in a free society to force you to have to comply to what I want to do.
That philosophy is applied to a number of issues. High on the list this campaign, Sunday shopping. The party says individuals should have the freedom to choose when and where they shop. The issue has attracted the son of Sunday shopping advocate Paul Magder to run as a Freedom Party candidate.
There's many other religious groups who do not observe the same day as a Sabbath, and it should be the individual who decides which day are days they are not, they do not want to work, or that they do want to work.
On free trade, the party wants a deal with the United States as soon as possible, and it wants trade barriers between the provinces removed. The Freedom Party is also against censorship in any form. It says the government has no business telling people what they can and cannot see.
Things like child pornography, there are laws against that already in the criminal code, and it's criminal laws that should be used in prosecuting that type of thing. You don't pass a law against a whole society in order to deal with the bad doings of a few people.
The party is also against forced association in unions. It feels those who don't want to pay dues shouldn't have to. And it is also against municipalities forcing small businesses to take part in business improvement programs. Party candidates say they'll be content if they receive between 1% and 2% of the vote this election, as long as they get to air their views. Carl Hanlon, CFTO News.
Are you disenchanted with political parties that sometimes seem as similar as Tweedledee and Tweedledum? For some people, the Freedom Party offers a distinct alternative. When Kate Young filed her story before the 1985 provincial election, Freedom Party founders promised something fresh for the politically weary. How they're faring today is the subject of tonight's follow-up report.
This is a familiar sight in Ontario these days, campaign workers hammering election signs into lawns. But this election sign isn't quite as familiar. It's for the Freedom Party of Ontario, and one of its founding members is Marc Emery, well known for his opposition to London taxpayers supporting the 1991 Pan Am Games. He's the party's campaign director and says every issue in this election, whether it be jobs or censorship, ultimately involves the citizens' freedom of choice. Freedom's governments have consistently taken away.
We believe that the purpose of government should be to protect your freedom of choice and not to restrict it. And we believe that the three parties that are in government today that are out looking for votes are parties that are basically going to increase your taxes, increase our debt, and further restrict the options and opportunities and choices you have available to you.
Emery formed the party just over a year ago with Robert Metz, who's running in London South and also party president. Both were previously associated with the Libertarian Party, but were dissatisfied with its lack of commitment between elections. They say this party will be around after May 2nd, even if it loses. And they say they have no doubt they will.
It's a long, hard climb to the Freedom Party's provincial headquarters. Perhaps symbolic of the long, hard climb the party still faces before it reaches political respectability and achieves its goal of getting government off the backs and out of the wallets of the people.
Freedom in a political context means only that you're free from the coercive force of government to predetermine your choices. It doesn't mean you're free from your obligations to your landlord or free from your obligations to your family or to your job or to any of those things. Those are obligations that each of us in the course of our life assume either directly or indirectly on a voluntary basis. That's the whole point of freedom, is that freedom in itself, if it's properly defined, limits the action of an individual within a free society. In other words, I can't be free unless you're free, unless the people out there are free, each individual. Otherwise, freedom has no meaning.
Well, our job is, and especially what my job is, to educate them that freedom is indivisible, that certain aspects of freedom they feel comfortable, or more importantly, that they see themselves benefiting by. You know, people who like to read adult magazines feel they benefit from no censorship. People who are in the import-export business feel they're going to benefit from free trade. What they don't go one step further and do is they don't see how it's also the same principle that will allow other people to benefit in areas where they're not concerned. Like a lot of people who believe in free trade don't support the right to smoke marijuana, and yet the two are indivisible.
Heavy ideas. In the era of the 30-second clip and the photo opportunity, the Freedom Party doggedly plugs away at getting its message across to the voter. Emery and Metz and the 350 other Freedom Party members in Ontario are in this for the long haul, and they're determined to stay in it, whether it takes 5, 10, or even 20 years.
So we decided we were going to take it slow. We were going to start organizing on a grassroots level in communities where we could be there essentially on a full-time basis, and we do most of our campaigning and activity and education programs between elections, and that's why we're here on a full-time basis.
The recent garbage strike in London was an ideal opportunity for the Freedom Party to demonstrate how its vision would work. Not content to be held hostage, as party officials put it, by City Hall and striking outside workers, the Freedom Party hired a truck and collected garbage from some neighborhoods.
This is what we thought of as a constructive protest. It's a way of saying, well, listen, we don't feel that we should be blackmailed either by the city or by the union or by anybody about essential services. And yet rather than, you know, take petitions or protest or picket or something like that, we thought what more constructive way of going about it than picking up people's garbage and showing that they don't have to say, oh, we surrender.
The Freedom Party is in favor of contracting out garbage collection to private enterprise to increase competition, reduce costs, and keep the taxpayer from being held hostage during labor disputes. While collecting garbage during a strike may have been popular with some, the Freedom Party's stand in favor of Sunday shopping tends to be unpopular with many.
Hello, here's a brochure supporting your right to shop on Sunday.
No, I don't like it at all. It's bad.
Well, what are you buying things for?
Metz has been a Freedom Party candidate in the last 2 provincial elections. 11 candidates ran across the province last time around. The party only expects to get 1 or 2% of the vote. The important thing is to field candidates.
There's the element of political credibility. Can you be electable in the immediate future? Well, that's something when we started this party we knew would be at least a decade or 2 away. Because credibility in an election is a totally different, it isn't really that related to your ideas directly. It's related more to the credibility of the organization behind the ideas and its consistency and its ability to be there election after election.
Running for election is expensive. The Freedom Party does fundraising among its members, but it needs more. That's where its philosophy of self-reliance comes in. The Freedom Party is also a business. The latest project is a calendar of individual freedoms featuring the icons of its laissez-faire philosophy. The party is expecting to raise about $30,000 from the U.S. edition of the calendar.
We're trying to move more into giving them a physical product. We don't like to be beggars like political parties are assumed to be. We like to be producers, a goods provider, somebody who's going to give you some value for what it is we're asking you to give us.
Is this a business?
Well, everything that has to survive has got to be treated like a business, except love. But I mean, that's different. But definitely in politics, you've got to provide your market, that's the public, with something they can use, something they want, something they will continue to come back for.
The Freedom Party is challenging many of the aspects of society people hold most dearly. The Freedom Party would do away with government-run health insurance. Abortions would be legal, but a woman would have to pay for it herself.
People are interested in whatever they can get out of the system with the least effort. But unfortunately, and the government is more than happy to give them that, rather tragically, but a lot of people resist the responsibility of their own decisions. They'd rather, oh, if I screw up, somebody else gets to hold the bag. But if I actually, you know, do well, then I want to keep it all. You know, people hate paying taxes, but they don't want to stop the government spending, which they see themselves benefit from. Yet they're identical. They're the same thing. You can't lower taxes without cutting government spending. Everybody wants lower taxes, but nobody wants to cut back on feeding at the trough, the gravy train of government spending, and these two are related. You know, you can't live like this for long without something just being destroyed, and likely it's your own future that's going to be destroyed if we continue to encourage our governments to to tax us and spend us, you know, and spend that money and taking it away from us all along, all the choices going away, all the money going away. But it's a long haul. You know, I mean, these people have been weaned like drug addicts on government spending and government programs and promises.
Any questions? Paul?
Sorry to bring up this Sunday shopping thing, but maybe you can help me. I'm a little confused.
Okay.
The airports in Canada, they're not subject to provincial laws because they're considered to be federal property that we own. And yet, you know, that's why Sunday laws aren't applicable at the airports.
Right.
And yet the government, province, but they do charge provincial taxes at the airport. And of course, in the province of Quebec, you know, they can use English and do whatever they want at the airports too. Now, it seems confusing, this whole thing. If it's public property, don't we own this property?
Well, there you go, Paul. That was the first point I came up with tonight. We don't own that property. But you've been to court so much by now, I thought you might have had an answer to that question.
Well, I'm just confused.
Have you ever introduced that article or that argument in a courtroom?
We've introduced so many things, it's unbelievable. In fact, I have a little pamphlet here. I was down in Philadelphia studying American history. I think their history is beautiful. They seem to be far ahead of us. And I ran into Amnesty International. I happened to be doing a big concert there. We've got one of their pamphlets. And I believe Canada subscribes to the Declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations. Is that not correct?
I'm pretty sure.
Right. Well, I've gone through this in my own lower high school educated mind. I find that these laws actually violate half of these points.
Oh, you bet.
And it is violating the United Nations Charter of Human Rights, which we subscribe to.
You don't have to go that far. It also violates the Canadian Constitution. Everything.
Well, actually, these laws violate every constitution of Canada.
That's right.
But we seem to be worried about freedoms in Africa and freedoms in Russia.
We should worry right at home. You know, we have a Declaration of Fundamental Freedoms in the Canadian Constitution, and they're not fundamental at all. And as you know, they can be overridden by any majority rule process. And that's really a problem we have in our society today. We don't really run on the principle of a democracy anymore. We run on a principle of majority rule. You've got 10 guys that outnumber 9 guys. The 10 guys get their way no matter what rights are in place. And that our Constitution is made to do this. And a lot of people don't understand that. Once you get past Section 2, the rest of it negates Section 2, and that's the fundamental freedoms.
The funny thing in my case, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that Sunday closing laws discriminate, but they're justifiable.
That's right.
Because women are second-class citizens. According to the Supreme Court of Canada, you need the protection. It's rather interesting. We're supposed to be equal. But all of a sudden, because the government wants to maintain this unjust and unfair law, you're not equal anymore. You're second-class citizens. So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, I better keep quiet.
Keep fighting, Paul. Anyone else? Yes.
Why are Canadians so docile that they will let people do anything to them? They will not stand up for themselves.
You know, I
think they put something in the water. What do you do?
You know, Canadians are really not that different from citizens of other countries. And what we see happening here...
My country, Ireland, we fight.
Well, you've just gotten a little further down the line from where we are, but...
But what do we do to you lot to get you up to fight and say, no, we don't want it anymore, and that's it?
You know, the problem is, though, what you say is true, and you can probably talk to a lot of people in this room who will agree with you, but you go out there in the public, and the average guy out there, and I hate to say this...
You know, the average guy says, I don't want anything to do with politics or religion.
Right, but he participates in them all the time. He goes out and votes. He'll go out and vote against something if he's against something.
They don't even vote.
Well, a lot of them don't, but you know, that means that they've left it to the minorities, and then the minorities take over, and they do the voting for them. And that's the same thing. If you don't vote, you've still exercised your right to vote. You know, a right to vote doesn't mean that you have to vote. A right to vote means that you have a choice of whether you want to vote or not.
So, Mark, what do we do to put some fire in them?
Well, you can't put fire. You got to get the stupid out of them first. You can't put fire into them. You've got to get them to understand that they're not getting more out of the system than they're paying.
Is it because they've had it so easy over here?
Yeah, and of course socialism looks like it works for a while until a credit card comes to the limit. And then they ask for the payments. You know, that's as far as it gets. Most people learn, unfortunately, from experience. They don't learn from fundamental roots or premises or principles. And as a consequence, they have to go through the experience repeatedly. And that's why, again, the challenge is educational. We have to show people that just because you pay taxes and you get free OHIP and you get pensions and you get whatever, you're not getting more out of that system than you're putting in.
The older people are.
Well, because they went on the top of the crest, that old pyramid, the pyramid we're talking about.
My fellow a bank full of
That's right.
they don't even need.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of senior citizens today who can't understand how young people are trying to get into the housing field or anything. So
we're still paying.
Yeah.
I think we're not paying.
That's right.
Yeah, but
Yes.
So gradual. You know, we started off when I was 15. The case of beer was $8.
When you were 15,
it's $23.
Yeah.
10 years, and it's so gradual. And Canadians don't know. They don't notice because every year we get boomed another 1 or 2%. It's almost at 50%.
Taxes effectively are over 50%.
Straight up. I mean, our kids, my kids, are going to be paying 75% tax, and they're going to be happy that they have OHIP.
That's right, and they've been conditioned to be happy and to accept what they're going to be given, but they won't have OHIP for much longer.
Complain about it, their parents are going to say to them, do you drive a car? Do you use the roads?
Got lots of questions out there. Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I have an historical footnote there. You know, in 1791 there was a revolt in the United States, that's long ago, over one of the first taxes the government put on whiskey, as it turned out. And over 150 people died when the U.S. government sent out soldiers to do them in to make them pay this tax. 150 people died. You know, you cannot imagine people in this day and age even giving their life once for a major tax revolt. And I think it's because in this day and age, most people know they're part of the problem. They feel kind of guilty because they know they're on the gravy train. They know that many people are trying to get more out of the system than they're putting in. And even though they complain about taxes, most people are well aware that they are part of the problem. In the old days, back in the 1790s, I guess, people knew they were just victims. They were being exploited and they weren't going to take it and they were willing to take arms. But most people today are so corrupted because we don't have a philosophical background in our lives, most of us. Most of us do not learn philosophy in school.
And why is that?
And, well,
who runs the school? Is there a plot here?
We're part of the problem and that we are guilty about it, and that therefore that renders us inert to action because we have to solve our own problem with this. And most people are part of the problem because they can't really motivate themselves. They realize they are the problem.
And a lot of people who understand the problem are still part of the problem because they haven't acted. They think that just by believing something or agreeing with something, they support it. And that's not what support is about. You have to go beyond that agreement level and actually put your money, put your body where your ideas are. Mary Lou.
Speaking of money.
Yes.
How do you guys continue to operate? Where do you get the money from? And can we save taxes like you could?
Well, you know, Mark lied on that thing. We do beg.
We also earn though.
No, that's true. We're combining a little bit of both. We always ask for money, we mail for money, we telephone for money, we hold dinners for money, and we actually create products for money that we try to sell to people who don't get tax credits for them, by the way. And we're going well beyond even our provincial jurisdiction. We've been selling these calendars in the States. We're building up huge mailing lists in the States. We want to sell products to them. We want to expand all the way across the board. But I'll tell you, the more we do, the less money we seem to have. The figures go up, but so do the expenses. And let's face it, we've only got about 11 constituency associations registered now. And what does that leave? About 99 to 101 to go. Before we have a fully represented political party in the province of Ontario. I need people who are willing to volunteer to do some organizing. It doesn't take a lot of time, it doesn't take a lot of effort. We do 90% of the work for anybody, but what we really need is the cash, and there's no doubt about it. You know, we're an officially registered political party, and that gives us the ability to give anyone who gives us money a tax break. Now, if you don't pay taxes, you can't take a very good advantage of this, but if you do, it pays off. And think about it, you know, if we get $200 out of somebody, that somebody gets back $150 on their next year's tax return. That's a pretty good deal. You just lent us $150 for a year, and we got $200 use out of it, and you got to get $150 back from the government that they're not spending against you. Yes, Christina.
I just have a question. Is that one reason why you're actually going the political route as opposed to being an association like the Citizens Coalition?
Absolutely. In fact, I think Freedom Party, as a registered party, is the ideal tool to do what we're doing. We can be a teaching group, we can be a lobbying group, we can be a support group. And we can use these, you know, this is just a tool. We don't have to play it by the rules that everybody else sets up. And for that reason, we're going to be shunned for a while. People are going to laugh at us. People are going to think we're a little kooky. As long as they don't know about us, they will. We have to be able to bear that storm, because until you get through that, you know, that barrier, things won't change in that regard. But that's exactly what we're doing. We do view the party as a tool. We work with individuals. We'll create literature for people and not put a Freedom Party name on it. I know, Pat, you know that for experience. We've worked with the people at Eaton's who beat a union ratification drive from coast to coast. Thank you, Freedom Party. We did it. We beat a union ratification drive on University of Western Ontario campus, thanks to Robert Vaughan sitting at this table. He was one of the people going to be unionized who came to us for help. Here's the literature. Doesn't say Freedom Party on it, but you know, you let the word out. You don't have to put it in print all the time, and people get to know you that way. And they know you're serious. And they know you're not just there for a, quote, partisan reason, which really turns off a lot of people in politics. And that's understandable. So you don't have to associate with Freedom Party on a completely partisan level. Mark.
Yeah, and I'd like to address Christina's point there. I have a bit of a grudge against the National Citizens Coalition. Now, they do a lot of good work and what have you, but they are very prejudicial in the issues they select. They select issues that are proper, and they support them on a semi-philosophical basis, but they're highly inclined to issues that benefit their members. It's usually something where their members can benefit directly with cash. And I think that's an easy way out. Freedom Party tackles issues where there are no immediate visible benefits, but the principle is so important that we have to defend it. I often think that we exchange mailing lists with the National Citizens Coalition because we do work with them. And I remember on the Sunday shopping issue, we sent out a solicitation to their membership in the metro area. And 6 to 1, they were against Sunday shopping in the most nasty, negative, behemoth way I've ever seen in my life. They were the most unconciliatory, nasty bunch of people I've ever seen.
I think we got the point, Mark.
A lot of their members are interested in freedom if they can make a buck out of it. But as far as principles go,
you know, it's
conservatives. Yeah.
Well, it's that statement too. You know, they're going for more freedom through less government. When really you can't get that. You have to get less government through more freedom. You got to be pushing the positive. You got to be pushing
for the philosophy.
The philosophy, right?
They say your present candidate will be better if it's privately run, or it'll cost us less if we lower taxes. But they're not really promoting the universality. That's the one place universality has a role in the indivisible nature of freedom. The NCC, like many other good groups in this country, promoting freedom in one aspect or another, only promotes in the aspect they can milk and ride. Where we end up taking on all the other issues nobody can make a buck at.
And I think the most important point
and we try to take on a few that we can make a buck at.
I think the most important point of what you said is, this is the only organization that you can say that about, because nobody else will take on those issues, because nobody else recognizes how important the principle is.
But you know, it works. You don't have to be afraid to do it, because I've learned in the London area, for example, Freedom Party is becoming very well known. We've been there for 2 elections, and people do not. They know we're a small party, but we don't have a fringe party label there anymore. People recognize us, they respect our opinion, and we have a very good rapport with the media and with the press, and with a lot of the other people that we're going to have to get to know to continue the work we have to do. Any other questions? I saw a bunch of hands up there a minute ago. Yes? Yeah.
What does the party see as the ideal role of the government?
The ideal role of the government is very limited. It is there to protect individual rights. We always say that the purpose of government is to protect individual freedom of choice and not to restrict it. That's the goal of government. Its role, in order to do that, you have to have your fundamental court system. So you have a justice system, you have to have the police, and you have to have a defense to protect you. You know, what we really do through government, ideal government in a free society, government shouldn't be allowed to do anything legally that its individuals cannot do. You know, I can't go out and steal. I hate to make it that blunt, eh? But a government can do that. See, government should not be able, a free government should not be able to do things that its citizens cannot do. We have the right to self-defense. Therefore, we have the right to organize something in our self-defense. We do not have the right to initiate any sort of aggression against anyone, because no one in a free society has that right. Why should a government have that right? And as soon as we get beyond that point, it's funny, you know, just using force. That's one of the things that Ayn Rand taught me, and it kind of probably set me on my political course for life the first time I read a book by her, and she defined something very clearly for me. That government is different from every other agency and anything in society because it has a legal monopoly on the use of force. Let's face it, it is law. If there's a law passed through government and you don't obey it, they can come down on you. Whether it's a rational law or not, they're still an instrument of force. And so when you think about government, think about a gun. That's what you've got. Would you help the poor with a gun? Would you go around to your neighbors and hold them up, going next door, listen, I got a cause across the street here. Is that the way you do it? Because that's the exact effect that you're going to get when you use a government that way. You can't use a gun legitimately and justifiably in an act of aggression. You can only use it legitimately and justifiably in an act of self-defense. And that's what the government should be there for. That's the role of government.
Bob?
Yeah.
We have a large display of material up in front here. You may want to explain to those people who haven't been to one of our functions before what it is and
yes, I talked to a lot of you when you were coming in earlier. I hope most of you know that most of the literature up here, except for things with price tags on it, which would be books, tapes, and buttons, but all the other literature, newsletters, pamphlets, everything, please help yourself. That's what it's there for. We want you to get to know Freedom Party. If you see something you like, tell us. If you see something you don't like, tell us. If you see something that's inconsistent, tell us. That's why we put our principles on paper. You know, people always say, how do I know that when you guys get elected you're not going to be like all the other political parties? There's a reason. Show me another political party, not in Ontario, but in Canada, that will put its ideas on papers and keep them there. That they don't have to change it every election. Every new candidate, new stand on this, new stand on that. You won't see that. And that's what we count on to keep us in order, is our own members and our own supporters. Because we know they're not stupid. We know they can pick up a piece of paper and read and say, listen, you guys said this, why are you doing this? And we've either got to be put on the spot and justify it, or we're going to look pretty bad. Lloyd, you've had your hand up there for a while.
Yeah, it was just earlier, the question of taxation came up, and I heard the comment of taxes being increased 1% or 2%.
Right.
And it's no slight intended, but it's part of the game of tax increases and the distortion of truth. When the Ontario sales tax went from 7 to 8%, that was a 14.2% increase in that tax.
That's right.
It wasn't a 1% increase. It was a 1 percentage point, yes, but it wasn't a 1% increase. And there was no outrage. And yet, if everybody heard that bread, milk, and all the staples of life were about to go up 14%, there'd be a hue and cry.
That's right.
And it's just part of the game of distorting the truth of what is actually happening.
I'll give you a perfect example. One of my coworkers commented on the reaction some people had to it going up, namely rushing out to buy things before it went up. And his attitude was, oh well, you buy something that costs you $500. How much extra is it going to cost you? $5. Big deal.
And that's how they accept it. That $5 is more worth to that person, or is less worth, how you look at it, than getting up off his behind and doing something about it. I mean, why should I put out all that effort when all I've got to do is, you know, cough up another $5, and then they'll leave me alone for a little while longer. But they won't. They keep coming back, and they keep coming back, and they keep coming back for more and more.
Do you think that when they put this leak out of Wilson, they put everybody's mind on the leak and no?
Oh, of course. It's brilliant, actually, and it's a great way to keep your mind off the budget and off of what's actually going on. Our taxes are going up incredibly.
But they're also concerned about Michael Wilson and what's going to
Oh, yeah. That's right. Any others? Any other questions? Okay, one here.
Where does the party stand on national monetary policy?
Well, in what sense? We don't have, as a provincial party, we're not in the national monetary policy business.
If it was to be extrapolated to a national scene, I'm curious if you
are you talking about the supply and the supply of money?
The influence of the government on the money supply.
Well, you see, government generally shouldn't even be in the business of money. They shouldn't be printing money. You know, a lot of people think that the government has always been issuing money. They don't realize that private, quote, money used to exist, and that it kept its value. Gold was a good standard of value, and I think we should be on a gold standard. There has to be some kind of discipline to the way governments inflate currency. Is that the kind of answer you're looking for, or are you looking for...
What sort of government intervention or control would there be?
There shouldn't be any.
So it's completely run by the whims of the economy.
Well, it's not whims. You're thinking of the marketplace. Yeah, the marketplace doesn't operate on whim. Only government operates on whim. The marketplace definitely operates on... You know, when we talk about the marketplace, this is one of those words maybe I should have mentioned in my vocabulary. People think of the market like it's some nebulous entity out there, when really the market is just us. That's us, people. Each person making their individual choice, acting in their own best interest, trying to take care of their families, trying to see that their needs are met, put some savings aside. That's the market. And it's not whim, believe me. When I pay my mortgage payment, I got to know I got those dollars there. It's not just, oh, well, you know. It's not a whim, and that's not how the market works. So definitely government should be hands-off. Mark, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that up until this century, several currencies operated at the same time in a given jurisdiction. Back in biblical times, you had 20, 30 currencies floating around, and in fact, what happened is when somebody tried to inflate the currency like that in a deadbeat government like we would have today, try to inflate the currency, then everybody would get rid of it and go to a more solid.
Right, you could switch currency.
100 years ago, if a certain bank was threatened with going bankrupt or instruction or there was fraud, or they were inflating their currency, people wouldn't even go to another currency. Well, today you're stuck with one currency. Now, of course, on the foreign exchange market, people go to what they call solid currencies, and that's why the Canadian dollar will go down because confidence moves from the Canadian dollar to another one. So, of course, we need more levers. If we had people issuing private dollars, like banks issuing their own currency based on a gold standard or a copper standard or silver standard or whatever, the country would be much more stable with competitive currencies, as it has always been up till this century.
What happens if one of those goes under? What would happen?
Well,
if you're holding the money in your bank.
I suspect you're out of luck, but several government currencies have also gone under this century too, and very few people have made recourse there. And the odds are, as it turns out, there were very few private financial currency failures in North America in the last 100 years. In fact, I can't recall one.
What would happen in a case like that is that currency would be devalued the same way that paper dollars are being steadily devalued over time against things like gold. And while that was happening, people would dump it.
There was a question at the end of the room, was there?
Yes. A couple years ago when I attended the Freedom Party dinner, one of the issues that we were working on was the Constitution.
Right.
And also one of the things that we were deliberating to include was pollution, ecology, etc. The stance that we take on, that we were talking about this before. I want to know if you have, talked that, or,
well, as to the Constitution, we've even gone a point farther. Right now, we're developing a complete manual, actually, of everything that you could possibly get involved with the Freedom Party, from our Constitution to our stand to action you can take, and to the issues. With respect to your issue of the environment and pollution, our latest newsletter, which just went out in the mail on Thursday, I doubt if any of our members have yet received it in the mail. Has anybody yet? You'll notice that the cover story on it, and we've got some copies of it here, relates to pollution. In fact, our representative in Welland Thorold, where's Barry? He's over there. Right there. He's right at your table there. He's been taking the city of Welland to task for dumping raw sewage into the Welland River. And, you know, again, one of the ultimate solutions to pollution, which is really what most people are talking about when they say the environment, is the institution of private property. Like, we believe in privatizing all property. And again, this is going back to that original concept. I'm not saying government can't own property, but if it does, it better be responsible for it. And if it isn't responsible, then at least you know who the guilty party is. When everybody claims it's public property, who do you blame? Who takes the responsibility? Guess who? The taxpayer. The guy that's stuck with the bill all the time. The guy who, quote, owns it. It's funny how we own these things that we can't really claim on, but we have to be forced to pay for. Suddenly that constitutes ownership.
Rooney spent $17 million when he went to this holiday to improve their environment. Wouldn't it be better if he had it in this country?
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
No, they already have the Ottawa Environment Improvement Association.
Do they? They're going to clean up Parliament, eh? Mary Lou.
Something that most people in this room don't know is when Bob and Mark started up this party, they made a commitment to do this full time. And the offices and the salaries of the people working there are paid for privately on their pocket and their parks. And I want to give you some money, and I want people here to know that it's easy to give $200 or $300 a year. If you don't have any pocket today, you can hopefully check for the French for the Bob McCoy and the
That's true. I really love it. And we've got to start already. Isn't that wonderful? Thank you, Mary Lou.
Now, when will the Freedom Party be large enough to do its finances the way the government do it and other parties do it, like deficit spending?
I hope we never get that large, Tom. Yes?
Well, I just wanted to make one comment on this question of pollution. It concerns me very much also. The fact is, you mentioned that there are responsibilities that go along with freedom, right?
Right.
And in my mind, that certainly is one responsibility that is there more and more every day. And I don't care if somebody has some private property, but they should have the responsibility also not to be violent.
That's right.
You know, I hope that you subscribe to that.
Oh, absolutely. Again, one person's private property rights, again, depends on other people's private property rights. You can't do something to your property that violates their property rights.
On supplementary, this goes way back to the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I hope that the Freedom Party does not subscribe to all the clauses.
No, we don't. Absolutely not.
One other point relating to pollution is that what these polluters are essentially doing is dumping their garbage in someone else's property, and no one is making them stop or telling them that if they want to do that, that there's a bill that they have to pay. And if the property rights were enforced, they wouldn't be able to get away with it.
That's right, and if you were an owner of property, private property was being polluted, you should certainly have the right to sue the polluter for full damages. That's the only way you're ever going to see the real cost of pollution met. Mark.
Here's an interesting thing about this. You and I have experienced this. Maybe you could talk about how to address this. One of the biggest problems in the movement for individual freedom is that people work really hard for a year or two on it, and of course freedom doesn't magically or materialize, and this discourages a lot of people because in the rest of our lives, when we put a great deal of effort into something, we get what we like to think are immediate results that gratify us.
Which you know we both try to produce as much as possible, and we document it right there.
Right, but we do still get people coming forward, and they work real hard for us, and they do things for years, and then they get discouraged. And I'm wondering, how do we deal with the fact that we've already anticipated a battle that could go 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Certainly when you and I are pretty old, we might see some long-term successes, but how are we going to address this sort of demand people want for immediate results?
Well, the problem is we can't. I think if someone wants an immediate result, we can't offer them that. I mean, it comes down to freedom of association. The people who are going to associate with this party are the ones that are going to recognize the problem for what it is and work towards a real solution. A quick solution won't be a real solution. And a quick solution will be done in just as quick as it was brought in. You know, that's the problem.
Because we still get letters saying, you know, if you guys really want to get elected fast, here's what you should do.
Oh, everybody's got a formula for getting elected, but nobody really understands the problem, especially the people that offer you formulas, because there aren't any. The only real thing is persistence, continual hard work, a solid base, solid philosophic base, and keep those ideas out there. You know, there's a rule Ayn Rand always puts. She said, if you put a good idea beside a bad idea, that good idea is going to be picked all the time over the bad idea by most people. The problem is the good ideas aren't out there yet. All you got is a choice of 20 bad ideas. And they're all basically fundamentally the same. They're all based on the same principle. Every other political party believes that they're there to make our choices for us. We vote them in, just handed our choices away. We don't believe that, and that's going to make us fundamentally different for quite a while.
I think, too, that there is another party which tries to portray that quick fix, and that's the Libertarians.
Well, Libertarians have, one of their big mistakes has been they've always been going for that vote, and they still make it one of their high priorities. And unfortunately, that has done a lot of damage to their movement in the sense of dashing false expectations. I've seen it over and over again. And then when there isn't that vote to go for, people start wondering, what can I do during the rest of the time, or what do I do between this election and the next election? So, you know, that's a good point there too, although that problem's a lot deeper than what we're just talking about now, but that could be a whole night in itself.
Could you talk
yes.
2 seconds about BIAs?
BIAs, yes. BIAs, most people, you know, the average person does not know what a BIA is.
Can you tell us what a BIA is?
BIA stands for Business Improvement Area, and this is one of those magical words the government makes up for extra tax.
Of course, they never call them that.
No, they don't call it that. You see how easy it is to push something on somebody just by changing the name of it? That's what Ayn Rand is talking about. That's what her books are all about. All you got to do is learn a dictionary, and you can beat 99% of the issues that are out there. Just use the words and quit changing the definitions. Rand always said, I just want to get on the philosophic note here, you know, she always said that the reason science has advanced so far is because in science, concepts stay the same. A 2 is a 2 is a 2. A 2 always represents 2. Can you imagine what would happen if tomorrow the symbol we know as 2 represented this? What would happen to all the equations, to all the mathematical equations that principles were built on, and discoveries were made, and progress was made? It would all collapse overnight.
Well,
this is what's happened to the English language.
I phoned up the Human Rights Department. I said, can you help me? They said, what's your problem? I told them exactly what my problem was. Oh, yes, that cannot happen. In Canada, we're a democracy, you're being forced to this, that, and the other. Silence. It wouldn't be a BIA, would it? She bangs the phone down like that.
A BIA is very much a negative democracy in a sort of way, because it doesn't ask for support of people, it wants to find out who's against it. Okay, that's how if not enough people protest, then they automatically assume that the majority is in favor.
But how can they protest with their neighbor and never even told they're in it?
Well, this is right.
Like myself.
That works exactly like that. But you see, a BIA...
We face the face of evil here.
Yeah. But just to answer the question of what a BIA is, for those who don't know, the Ontario government has created a new way of taxing business people. And what they've done is designated certain business areas in various communities, and I understand there's about 225 of these in Ontario. 250? Boy, they're still collecting. That are designated as, quote, business improvement areas. And what the members, quote, of this area get to do is contribute a third tax that helps beautify and keep their roads clean and keep the road upkept. Now, you have to ask yourself, where's the tax money of these business people going? It comes from their realty tax, their property tax, and their business taxes. Why isn't that going into that, you know? So governments are looking for all kinds of sources of new money, and they're going to make up all kinds of names for it. And it's not always going to be self-evident what it is. People who are in a business improvement area are paying 3 taxes. And that doesn't include income tax or sales tax.
20,000 from the guy at the corner, 750 from the other one.
That's right.
3 from me, 5 from the guy next, you know, I mean,
that's right. Yeah. They'll just try to squeeze what they can out of you. Yes, Pat.
But what they fail to realize is that it's the consumer in the long run that pays for it.
Consumer pays for everything.
I've been fighting these BIAs for 4 years now. And it's the consumer, you're the consumer that comes in the shop. We have to get the taxes somewhere. So what do? We put it on the price of our product, whatever we're selling. And in the end, when you can't put the price of the product can't pay it, you're out of business. Now, in Port Credit, we have 40-some empty stores. In Burlington, we have 47 empty stores. We have $300,000 budgets just from a few businessmen in these small areas. And there's 225 of these. Can you tell the mega millions they're getting in on just these little BIA things, you know? And we're really at a standstill, Bernice and I, right now, because we're at the end, I'm at the end of a 4-year fight with a meeting coming up Monday night with Hazel McCallum, the most lovely mayor the country has ever made mayor, let me tell you, with 25 years of political power, who has aimed every ammunition at us possible. And Bernice is the same. We have won the petition. We have the majority of the business people signing petitions to get rid of these. We've come out to meetings for 4 years. We've literally shut our shops and gone door to door to do this because it's from 5 in the morning till midnight job, let me tell you. For 2 years I haven't worked in my store. It's been a full-time job. And we're at the point and they still won't get rid of them. They still won't get rid of them. So what happens? Our business people go out of business. We lost 7 stores in my area in January alone. There's only 106 of us left. I've lost 5 in my family.
It's a free country. I know one businessman.
But you know, Bob, when we called Municipal Affairs, whose greedy little idea this was down at Municipal Affairs, Peter Bowles and John Canham are always on holidays. Now I wonder why. They're the boss of these 220. They're never there. They're either in Florida or they're out. Sorry, they're in the How can we, Bob, put some pressure on Municipal Affairs because basically it's not Hazel McCallion or the mayor in Etobicoke. It's coming from, you know, Municipal Affairs. How can we put more pressure?
I think what you have to do in that particular case is you're going to have to work through an ad hoc process. And not always, you're going to have to network. You're going to have to network people who share your conviction about BIA. Then you're doing the right thing. The thing is, again, it's not a quick fix, is it? You've been working at it 4 years.
I'm sorry, we've even triggered a review. The law is 20 years old.
Yeah.
So by going on television...
The government asked us for our input on that review as well, but have we heard anything from it? No.
Oh, yes. They're going to give them more power instead of less. They are now going to own commercial property. As these little businesses go out, they're going to pick them up at 1/3 of the cost and own them. And if by some chance they should lose them because their budgets aren't good enough, where will it go back? But to the city. So
what a scam, eh?
4 years' worth, they're having more power instead of less. It's unreal. We have businesses pulling out to the States and everywhere, you know, all out of the state.
Well, I know one fellow that moved out of Mississauga to get away from his BIA, and he moved to Niagara Falls only to be stuck with the biggest BIA he ever saw. He's paying almost $1,000 a year in BIA taxes.
You can point out, though, Bob, that we are doing our bit as a party to help these people.
Oh, that's for sure. More than a bit.
9.5 years in fighting these.
In fact,
we'd like to invite all of you to our meetings Monday and Thursday. We wish you'd show up en masse. We take you out to dinner. Believe me, we need all the support we can get. One is in Mimico on Thursday evening, 7:30 at Bernice. She'll be glad to give you the address, and mine is in Clarkson, right west of Port Credit.
Right. And anyone else who wants to show up and support, please see these folks tonight.
It's public meeting.
See democracy in action.
You'll love it.
Barry.
We have a real problem talking to people about business improvement areas. How can you be against improving your business?
Pardon me?
How can you be against improving your business?
It doesn't improve our business. It doesn't improve our business.
We know it doesn't.
No.
But this is the public perception.
Because of the language.
This is what you have to fight.
Well, how do we change it?
Yeah, I'm not
They
sure
just
I
took
have the answer.
$50,000 a year. Their president of my company has been out there for fraud. He is now in Quebec, and they said he can go up twice, and he can say, oh, I'm not ready to face anything.
Well, in Welland, they found another way around this. We don't have a business improvement area anymore. We have a downtown development.
Well, that's what they call it.
Now, who could be against developing downtown? I'm for it.
And they did that in London. We discredited them so much that they came back.
Yeah, I think we got to tackle that London one again, Mark.
Oh, it did down all for us. I'll tell you that.
It's just you really have to go after the people and explain to them that the name has no relationship whatsoever to what it is.
Taxes, taxes, taxes.
That's right. And that's one of the first things maybe you should go for. Name the thing what it is, and then see how people respond to it.
Yeah. They won't.
Do you have a business, sir?
No, I don't.
Then what the hell are you talking about?
Now, Barry's actually very familiar with them, though. He's been well in their EIA interactions as well. So Barry's been keeping familiar with them, too. Because we've gone there and delivered our brochures on the EIA.
Okay, well, let them have a business and let them take the taxes off from their limited cost. It's like my counselor, Faulkner. He says it's wonderful. I said, how much do they cost you, Mr. Faulkner? He said, well, nothing for these.
This is the point now. You have to tell the people that what they are calling it is not what it is.
We've done that, sir. 4 years of that. Newspaper articles from the Toronto Star to the Globe and Mail. We've been on the front page since November. Or not the front page, beg your pardon, about page 5 to 8. Page 5 to 8 since November. We were on for the whole month of November on TV. And you know, it's not AIDS. They don't even listen to talk about AIDS. So how are they going to listen to this? That you, the consumer, are paying for this. And there will soon be no small business in this country if they don't step forward. My area alone, 106 of us left, they've got us in debt for the next 10 years to pay a $500,000 loan.
And that's part of the tactic,
Yes,
which we put in our literature.
Put $1 million one in $1 million one in Mimico. And yet they won the vote to get rid of it. It is disgusting.
Sir, what you say now?
Now what can we do past that? What's the next step? We've done everything, really. Short of picking up the guns, our area has done everything. Joe, we have done everything. We want to
Okay, Barry.
Sounds good. You have to say, this is not business improvement. It is not improving anybody's business. We're losing.
You may just have to repeat it 1 million times before it gets through.
We're on the second round, Bob.
Okay, anyone else? We should close off soon. We're already running very late. David, let's make this the last one tonight.
This is a reference to Mark's question about not having success. You have to define it in smaller steps.
That's right.
I have a box of 2,500 pamphlets, and I go out for an hour and deliver 200 of them. I come back, I got 2,300 left. I don't think I did anything. I started to train myself to say, I delivered for 2 hours. I got rid of 200.
That's right. And that's paying off too, David. Good for you. Okay.
I gotta ask.
You gotta ask this. Okay.
In no way to model that.
Okay.
Where does the Freedom Party stand? This is one issue that's bugged me. Where does the Freedom Party stand on the individual's right to invest in a state-run economy? I'm thinking North American investment in the Soviet economy is going on.
On an individual's right, say it again, to invest.
Individual's right to invest in the state-run economies like Zimbabwe and the Soviet Union. Right now, Canadian investment in the Soviet Union, U.S. investment in the Soviet Union. To me, there's a conflict of interest that boggles the mind on 5 different levels.
Well, you know, it's an individual's right to invest his money wherever he sees best fit. Whether you agree with that country, a lot of people might argue with you that this is a country that's run like that.
Well, it is.
Okay, well, how would you have me answer the question on what I think about how an individual should be able to invest in Canada? I think an individual should be able to invest wherever he wants. I don't believe in trade sanctions. I don't believe in any of that stuff because it makes the situation worse.
So you don't believe
by being in contact with these countries, you know,
pockets of bureaucrats. Basically,
they do it here. They do it here.
Play political games with whoever you can to make a buck. Is that what?
No, what you have. No, but see, our jurisdiction isn't Zimbabwe or some other country. Right?
No,
you know, freedom starts at home.
How can you advocate?
And I can't take.
How can you advocate freedom and say you can't do this? You either advocate freedom or you don't. The first one,
right, I can't.
The Soviet Union, that's his business, not mine.
I can't suggest to restrict the freedom of the people in this room because of something another country is doing. Perhaps their influence in that country may change what is happening there now, and that's what I believe happens. The more freedom is very contagious. When people start seeing it come in, and you've got trade going into an area, barriers start to come down. Sure, they shouldn't be there. Sure, there's a lot of corruption. Sure, there's a lot of countries in the world that aren't the way they should be. But that's no reason to make our country like their country just to get even. I don't think that's a solution. Boy, look at all the hands come up. I thought everyone would want to rush out of here by 10 o'clock. We're already going back.
Just one remark.
Yeah.
Ravel's Democracy Parish.
Sorry?
Ravel, he's a well-known French philosopher right now.
How democracies perish?
How democracies perish. You should read that beside Ayn Rand.
Okay.
The answer to this question that the young man there raised.
Okay, and we've written a lot of articles ourselves on democracy, which are published in Consent magazine.
Perish.
Yeah.
Precisely by they carry the seeds of their own destruction.
That's right. And in fact, we've got a series of articles running on that very subject in our magazine Consent, and I really recommend you pick them up. We've got a series called Can We Survive Democracy? And it's very eye-opening. Democracy and free elections, as we understand they are two different things. We believe in free elections, but we think you should be voting for an elected representative to represent your individual rights, not your interests, and not someone else's interests. This is where the difference is, and that's what democracy is being used for today, is to get people's interests looked after instead of rights. We could go on. We're against forcing people to belong to any association they don't want to belong to. Please, sure, go ahead. Thank you.
But don't you think sometimes unions play a good part?
If they were voluntary and people wanted to join them and serve the function, certainly. Just like BIAs. Unions, BIAs are like a business union. The very same principles that work there work in unions.
I think the unions have to explain what they're doing and all the rest of it.
Yeah, but they can still force you to join even after they've explained it. Well, they all can. If you want to work for an employer, you got to join the union. Or at least pay dues. Yeah, you have to. Patrick.
Behind motherhood and apple pie, monarchy seems to be more important than their own sexual preference.
The which?
Behind the motherhood and apple pie, the monarchy.
Well, the monarchy, I thought, okay.
Seems to be more important than their sexual preference. Do you get an idea what the Freedom Party feels about the monarchy?
Gee, I never really thought about the monarchy. You know, it's funny, today the monarchy plays a very different role than it used to in Britain. Almost the monarchy, it has become a reversed role. I can't really say that I want to abolish the monarchy. The monarchy is almost the thing that is the check on balance of power in Britain, which is a total reversal of what the monarchy started out to be hundreds of years ago, which was absolute power. So in a funny sort of way, the British monarchy operates a lot like a constitution in the way it has an effect on the laws in the country, but it certainly isn't the ideal way to do it. Mark.
You know, the interesting gentleman's concern about investing in foreign governments, be they evil or what have you, it's important to note that when we invest money in anything, we don't just invest in a product or a profit. We invest in ideas. All products are an idea incarnate. And so I think really when we look at enlightening the world, by investing in any product, we help educate people. When we educate them, we bring them closer to reality and closer to philosophy and things like that. So you can't really hurt people when you invest in foreign nations and what have you. I think, you know, if you look at electronics, the reason China has a revolution going on that it does is because they know that everybody else in the world can see it, and that's because products transcend borders and make us closer to the ideals of liberty. And I don't think you can ever lose when you export ideas, export products, export profit. I think that brings us all closer together and makes us more in touch with each other as individuals.
That's right. Okay, I guess we're going to leave it there for tonight. I know a lot of you we've got a busload of people have to get back to London tonight. Just a couple of closing announcements. Just want to let you all know. First of all, I want to thank the following people for all their work and help on the dinner tonight. Greg Jones, Mark, Brent, Bill, who just left, and Robert. Thank you for everything you've done for our dinner tonight. I want to let you know our next officially planned dinner will be in London on the last weekend in September. Everyone here is going to get information about it. We're bringing Michael Emerling up from Las Vegas to have one of his terrific Art of Political Persuasion workshops in London on the same weekend. And we'll have an announcement about that coming up soon. please, on your way out, we're going to have some calendars placed by the door. If you want a free calendar and you haven't got one yet, American or Canadian version or one of each, please help yourself on the way out. Any book sales or anything, please see us. And have a great summer. We're going to see you again many times, I hope. And I hope evening. Thank you very much.